Morning, everyone. I feel like you don't need to hear the speech now. It's all there, condensed in that video. But it's great to see you, and thank you so much, Helen, to you and the IFS, and to UCL Lab for giving me this opportunity to update you on where we are in Greater Manchester and where we're going. Today, Greater Manchester raises the bar once again on growth. We're publishing for the first time our cluster map. 5 defined locations across the city region, which, as this century develops, will host industrial clusters of global significance. And I think you might see an illustration of where those clusters are in a moment. In other words, a concrete plan to reindustrialise the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, bringing high-value employment to all parts of Greater Manchester. This was the missing piece in our growth jigsaw. And this is the moment on Greater Manchester's journey which many people have been waiting to see, because they've seen the change in our city centre. And for those of you who've been recently, it is a dramatic change. But until now, they've not had a clear sense of the type of jobs that will be found in the boroughs surrounding our city centres. So today we can give them clarity on the new industries that will surround our city, bringing prosperity to more places and better prospects for young people for the next century and more. Since Theresa May's government, we've been working on the concept of a local industrial strategy. It was the right thing to do, and we've never given up on it, even though central government did. We've been developing and refining our thinking on 5 core sectors: creative industries, digital and tech, life sciences, advanced manufacturing and materials, and green tech. And you can see those are the sectors, and you can see the map where those clusters will be based. What makes Greater Manchester's work on the local industrial strategy stand apart is that we are the only city region in the UK to have done the hard work of both developing sector-specific plans for those 5 sectors, but also a spatial plan underpinning it all, grasping the difficult nettle of land allocation and greenbelt release, giving us defined geographical locations to host those 5 global clusters. So the result is a UK growth plan, a growth plan unique in the UK for its precision, credibility and ambition. It's not wishful thinking or pie in the sky. All 5 clusters are either built or being built right now. Our creative cluster, you can see in the teal colour on the map, controversial, is well-established media city, and we'll be working with owners Landsec to double it in size over the next decade. That is their plan, and it's a very exciting one. Our digital and tech cluster is to be found in the city centre. We've been the fastest growing digital and tech economy in Europe in the last decade. And as part of it, we have the largest AI sector by headcount outside of London and the South East, and a cyber strength that in the next decade will be built out by the development of a government digital campus close to Manchester Piccadilly. Our life sciences cluster can be found on the Oxford Road corridor, pale blue, sky blue, city blue. And it is obviously linked to the biggest hospital trust in Europe, Manchester Foundation Trust, and it will soon see the global asset of the UK Biobank take up new headquarters on the nearby Manchester Science Park. Make no mistake, this is truly of global significance. So then you come to our 2 emerging clusters, one in the northeast of Greater Manchester, linking Bury, Rochdale and Oldham, and one in the southwest, linking Salford and Trafford. So up in the northeast, we officially broke ground in November 2025 on the Sustainable Materials and Manufacturing Centre at Atom Valley in Rochdale. It's the name of the cluster. And we did that in partnership with the University of Manchester. This is a major project aimed at creating a world-class hub for advanced materials and manufacturing. Over the coming years, this cluster, linking those three boroughs, aims to host over 20,000 high-value jobs. And we've protected that land for that high-value employment. For those of you who know our city region, it would have been so easy to let that land for warehousing or distribution logistics, because it's right on the M62, but we didn't. We kept a high ambition to bring those jobs to a part of our city region that most need those good jobs. It's going to be complemented by the other emerging cluster, a green energy cluster in the southwest of Greater Manchester. Again, in November 2025, Highview Power broke ground on the world's largest liquid air energy storage plant in Carrington, backed by a £300 million investment. It's the first of its kind in the UK, one of a few in the world, which will transform the economics of wind energy by capturing and storing in liquid form the output of the turbines through the night. That's often when wind energy can't put into the grid because the grid's full. So this changes that. And it will provide enough clean energy to power nearly 500,000 homes. The first phase should be operational later this year, and it will sit alongside a green hydrogen production facility, a battery storage plant, and the existing Carrington power station. This green energy cluster is well located to connect with the new HyNet hydrogen pipeline linking Liverpool and Manchester through the Manchester Ship Canal, which the government has backed. And it opens up the prospect of Greater Manchester hosting one of the world's first green hydrogen economies. So, these 5 clusters, as they build out, will support businesses active in these sectors in satellite sites across our 10 boroughs, for instance, life sciences in Bolton. It is all supported by the change which has already taken place in our city over the last decade. It is now a major centre for professional services, and with the support of all 6 of our universities, it has built out a research infrastructure in those universities to support an innovation-led economy. Our annual average growth of 3.1% over the last decade, double the UK rate, and which, according to provisional 2023 data, has taken the Greater Manchester economy to over the 100 billion mark, could, with the right support from the national level, accelerate its growth rate further between 2025 and 2035. But whether that comes or not, we will now be backing ourselves and taking a more intentional approach to investment. Just as we took public control of our buses, we will now be doing the same with our investment strategy. Late last year, we launched the Greater Manchester Good Growth Fund, and we will use it to advance place-based regeneration and housing growth in our boroughs, as well as backing the sectoral cluster plan I have set out. And we'll do that with a mixture of our own borrowing, partnership with the Greater Manchester Pension Fund, and we hope other national funders like the National Wealth Fund. It is a new, more assertive and confident approach, drawing on what we have learned over the last decade. It's an interventionist approach. We can't wait for the market to magically back our places. It didn't happen in the past. So instead, we are making the weather ourselves. That is what the Good Growth Fund is set up to do. But by making the initial investments and setting out the long-term ambition, we create the conditions for the private sector to come in later down the line. It is why we have a 10-year pipeline of investment projects and are looking for investor partners. But I do want to make something clear. I hope some of them are listening today, but I want them to understand something, knowing, as you know, the kind of place that Greater Manchester is, the way that it thinks and works. We want the right partners on this decade of good growth. We don't want exploitative or extractive growth. The north of England has had too much of that in the past. This is about growth which recycles wealth back into our communities, not siphoning it out, creates pathways for our young people, and offers good, secure jobs for our residents. We want investment partners who share those values, who subscribe to the Greater Manchester tradition of economic and social progress going hand in hand. So, for instance, We will link funding distributed from our Good Growth Fund to our Good Employment Charter and our Good Landlord Charter. We will link it to the supply of 45-day work placements, work experience placements for our young people, and to apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships. So we create a path for everybody into this new and growing Greater Manchester economy. Now, you might be asking yourself as you sit there thinking, well, how has Greater Manchester managed to get itself to this point where it can be so confident and clear about what it is doing and where it is going? And the truth is, it goes way back before me. I'm not going to stand here and try and take the credit, because people in our city region have been working at this for decades, 4 decades, and they've done the hard yards of getting regional growth going. Because of all of that, though, we now know what works and what doesn't, because we've pretty much tried it all. For years, regional growth in Britain was like the Holy Grail. Everyone said they wanted it, but no one knew how to find it. But finally, the English cities are rising again, and the catalyst is devolution. No one has done any of this for us. We have done it for ourselves. In our case, the main foundation of the success of Manchesterism, as it has been called, is the creation of a different political culture, the polar opposite of the Whitehall and Westminster way. Manchesterism starts with setting higher ambitions for what we can be in the 21st century than were ever set for us at a national level. In fact, pre-devolution, there was no ambition for us or the other English city regions anywhere outside of the Golden Triangle. Devolution has allowed us to set ambitions when there were none there before. And then from those ambitions, we set out a long-term, patient approach to achieving them, rejecting the short-termism endemic in the Whitehall culture. Manchesterism then seeks to roll back the 1980s and take more local public control over the essential drivers of the economy, such as housing, utilities, transport, and education. It rejects unnecessary fragmentation and competition in public services, and instead is highly integrated and collaborative. A whole place approach, uniting all sectors, public, private, academic, community, voluntary, and faith. All threads woven together, rather than an approach driven by the partial and often conflicting positions of the Whitehall silos. And the operating principle underneath all of this is place first, not party first. This is important because it gives business the confidence to walk in and engage more deeply in a place-first context. And the resulting strong partnership we have built with our private sector is critical to our success. It is business-friendly socialism. These are the ingredients of growth. It takes time to develop them, and they are hard to achieve. But the patience to do so over decades is now paying huge dividends for Greater Manchester. We have built a new politics and are now building a new economy as a result of that. Other city regions like Liverpool have also started to break out of the long-term low-growth trends using devolution to create a new political culture. And credit goes to Mayor Steve Rotherham for achieving that. It all means that we've arrived at the point where the debate in this country is no longer what do we need to do to get regional growth, as it once would have been at a conference like this and people casting around for ideas. We know the answer. We know what gets growth. We've laid it out for you. Instead, the question is, how much growth do Whitehall and Westminster actually want? What is their ambition for the English regions and as to what we can be in the 21st century? I say that because parts of the Whitehall system still continue to resist devolution on bread and butter issues, where the growth imperative demands that devolution. This debate is rapidly coming down to an issue of where power in Britain lies, and whether Whitehall is prepared to let go. A clear test for this is the Department for Education's continued resistance to meaningful devolution over post-16 education and skills policy. The logic of the cluster map behind me and in front of you is that Greater Manchester skills needs will increasingly specialise in those places in the next decade. The highly specific nature of the activities within our clusters means the employers will need a much more agile, integrated and responsive skills system than exists at present. We believe the city region should be able to move away from the fragmented approach of the past and have the ability to commission our skills system to deliver to the sectoral needs of our fast-changing economy, as well as taking devolved control of the growth and skills levy. Another area where a more devolved approach is needed is housing. Rather than a project-by-project approach, we believe Homes England should use the innovation of the Greater Manchester Good Growth Fund to operate more as a portfolio investor, like the Greater Manchester Pension Fund or the National Wealth Fund, agreeing high-level outputs in return for investment. Crucially, rather than just chasing general numerical house-building targets, we need to agree a new target on reaching the tipping point in Greater Manchester of building more council and social homes every year than we are losing through right to buy. Sadly, we're still in a net loss position, and like every other part of England, we need to move to a net gain position, as there is no way of achieving all of our economic and social ambitions for our residents whilst we remain in the grip of a housing crisis. So on skills and housing, we need to come to a new consensus with the government on devolution arrangements that will drive maximum growth and make the biggest social impact. However, in other areas, the government deserves great credit for making faster progress than expected. The first sign of fiscal devolution, in the form of the overnight visitor levy, is extremely welcome. Supporting growth requires investment, for instance, in extra policing or extra transport to deal with the extra visitors in the city. And it would be regressive and unfair to ask city regions like ours to fund it all from the council tax. It is right that visitors make a modest contribution too. We are also encouraged by the potential local role in the planning of major infrastructure as set out by the government last week in its announcement on Northern Powerhouse Rail. Rather than imposing substandard infrastructure, as too often it has been the case in the North in the past, we are being given the opportunity to specify the most ambitious design for Manchester Piccadilly and then develop new mechanisms to contribute to the building of it, such as long-term business rates retention and land value capture. This is highly significant, as it finally opens up the opportunity for devolved authorities to get their hands on the major levers of growth. For a city region that helped build from the bottom up the first commuter railway exactly 200 years ago, it feels finally like history is turning full circle. So, what does this all mean in conclusion? Freeing up all of England's regions to take more control of their affairs and their destiny is the way to build a new politics, and through that, a new economy. It is the way Britain will become more functional again, and the way we start to close the inequalities between people and places that you have been discussing today. In recent days, we've heard the claim from the new British right that Britain is broken. Well, I can tell them in no uncertain terms that Greater Manchester isn't broken. But if they believe what they are saying, can I ask them what and who they think broke it? I know what I think. It was the four horsemen of Britain's apocalypse: deregulation, privatisation, austerity, and Brexit. The deregulation and privatisation of the 80s and 90s created a race to the bottom. It left Britain unable to guarantee the standard of its infrastructure, as we've seen with the water industry. It left people and businesses paying more for the essentials. We had unaffordable bus fares when I came in as mayor in 2017. And it left the country losing control of the basic ability to manage its costs, chasing rents through the benefits system. The austerity and Brexit of the 2010s deepened the hole by hollowing out English cities and towns, and of course our councils. It has all combined to leave the country in a low-growth doom loop. Our shallow adversarial political system has shown itself incapable of lifting us out of it, and it only adds to the volatility. So we do find ourselves stuck in a rut and in hock to the bond markets. The arch-Thatcherites of reform talk of taking back control, but in fact they are the ones who gave that control away. This is a decisive moment in our politics when the British left should go out confidently and win the argument as to who broke Britain and what will fix it. The lesson from Manchester is that to do it, we must build a new politics, more collaborative, so that we can take the long-term prudent approach to repairing the economy. Manchesterism is a modern and functional response to the high inequality, low-growth trap that came from the 1980s drive to over-centralise political power in the Treasury and privatise economic power. The new right were the cheerleaders of those changes, and they simply do not have the same lived experience in the parts of the country as we do, where the damage was worse. They don't understand, therefore, what happened. Matching England's devolved authorities with a national political system that thinks and works in the same way, rather than at cross purposes, as it is right now, would get the whole country pulling in the same direction. It would create the circumstances in which we could progressively retake public control of those essential enablers of the economy and, for instance, build the council and social homes that would once again provide the foundation for working class aspiration in this country and simultaneously allow a stronger grip on the public finances, providing reassurance to the bond markets. On those solid foundations, we can then build a higher value, future-facing, more productive economy, similar to the plan for Greater Manchester I have laid out today, in which people are set up to succeed, and there is a path for everyone. This is Manchesterism, and yes, as someone once famously said, it does mean doing things very differently. Thank you very much.
We'll use a few minutes to take some questions. I'm going to abuse my position as chair and ask you the first question, Andy. So you spoke there a lot about kind of how you've used the powers from devolution. Thinking about the next steps, I mean, where do you think the biggest bang for the buck would be in terms of devolution? To what extent is it about devolving the powers for Manchester and other regions to be able to do new things, and or the kind of the ability to raise the revenue through which you might do that? I guess related to that, to what extent do you think different regions might need different things, or actually Manchester's now set a blueprint that others should be following?
Well, there always will be differences between the places. So, you know, a cluster plan for the West Midlands would look different to ours, but I think the fundamentals are the same. I think increasingly we are all converging in our thinking, and the combined authorities of England are, you know, increasingly sharing experience and moving in a similar direction, of course, with a local flavour and local difference. But that's how it should be. But we are really clear that the template we're outlining is the way to have a higher growth economy, and then to support more residents into benefiting from that higher growth economy. And actually, if you follow the logic of what I'm saying, reshape the state completely. You know, we have an integrated settlement now, which is a sort of consolidated single budget that comes from Whitehall. Everything should go through that. Then you've got the opportunity to streamline the state at a local level, and you get the most, if you like, impactful use of public money, because it's all coordinated in terms of how you're using it. It doesn't, to me, make sense still to be spending billions through outsourced top-down provision in the benefit system. You know, a sort of anonymous computer says no type thing that our residents fear interacting with. You know, that the local state now should be completely empowered so that everything within it is coherent and it's all going to the same plan. I think we're in a sort of middle ground at the moment, if I could put it that way, as I said, where you've got some really positive examples of devolution, but then some of the bread and butter things still not, you know, homes and skills still not quite knitting in to the plan. But then on another front, the fiscal devolution we're beginning to see is incredible progress. So I don't necessarily feel it's not moving quick enough. We are moving very quick now. And actually what I've said to you today is we're doing it more and more for ourselves now, using the heft of our integrated settlement, the confidence to do our own borrowing, the partnership with other big funders like the Greater Manchester Pension Fund. We've kind of broken into this new decade, the second decade of devolution in Greater Manchester, is already very different. But my point, though, in the speech was, how much does Whitehall and Westminster actually want to empower this? Because there is still a sense of a wrestling match for the power, in the sense that the power still has to reside here. I would say that is a barrier to growth, and it becomes increasingly incoherent to do that when you see the progress that we're making. So it implies, I'm afraid, massive change for the British state. But as I was saying at the end, we can't stay where we are. We are in a rut. We have to break out of that rut. We've kind of come, in some ways, the country has stumbled across the answer, and I think it's this new map of bottom-up devolution. Now that we've created it, we should just absolutely lean into it, and I think it is a route to a higher growth Britain. Great, thank you. Let's take a couple of questions before we have to let Andy go. And there are roving microphones, and I'm going to be sport for choice, aren't I? I'm going to go with the people I saw first, and I apologise to everyone else I didn't see. Oh, sorry, I was actually going to come down here to the gentleman in the middle. Sorry, I'm going first on a purely first come first served basis, so I don't have to pick favourites. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joe from MHCLG. Something you mentioned, and I can't remember your specific wording, but it was something about making sure that we're sort of aligned in our general focus nationally. But you also spoke a lot about, devolving and empowering these parts. How does that, not that you're contradicting yourself, but how does that square, and how do we find a good balance of, making sure we're relatively aligned, but then also giving places like the power to make the decisions and choose the themes which they want? Yeah.
Well, can I take two at a time, if you don't mind? So, Victor, can we come down to the front? We'll take Xiao's question, and then I'll let you couple together so we don't run out of time. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Xiao from the IFS. You talked about the importance of long-term planning for investment and growth, sort of in contrast to the short-termism that often characterises politics. What do you think it is about the institutions in Manchester that enables that sort of long-term planning?
Yeah, good question.
I'll let you take both of them. Thank you.
Well, thank you both. Joe, I should say, and it didn't perhaps come over in the speech, but I am hugely admiring of MHCLG in the way that you have supported us as a department. And so I'm not making a sort of, a sweeping criticism here. MHCLG have genuinely been brilliant to work with and have moved us further than I thought was possible in many ways. Under the last government, when Michael Gove negotiated the Trailblazer deal, and more recently in the task and finish process we were in with your department and the Treasury. So in some ways there's really amazing progress has been made. But I still sense there's holding back in parts of the system, and as I say, it's on quite critical issues. I don't think there's any contradiction. What we need is if we're going to have mission-led government, and that is still an if, I think we should. I think the Prime Minister was right about that. It really needs to be lived now. And if we're going to be a growth mission government more than anything, it does require real change in Whitehall, not just saying they support growth. It does mean you've got to do things quite fundamentally differently, because growth is, by definition, nurtured from the bottom up. It can't be ordained from the top down. You kind of have to set places up like us to go out and get the growth. We're the ones who will go and get it. And I still feel that's not, it's not understood. There is still the old departmental position will come before the pro-growth, bolder position. Even in the Treasury, there still might be an impulse to control public spending more than invest to create a growing, productive economy. And those tensions, I think, haven't been yet resolved. But they could be because of the progress that's been making. And I think the state just has to, if you like, reprogram itself to work through integrated authorities at the local level, and then allow a very different approach to the way outcomes are achieved. That it's like we've set these things up, but we still haven't reprogrammed the state at a national level. I think if it was a similar long-term pro-growth, patient approach, backing combined authorities on that journey, I think that there's no contradiction there. to me. And when it comes to public services, we've said we'll be the prevention demonstrator for the country. Let us intervene very differently in how we support our residents in a more preventative way, and then achieve the waiting list challenges for the Department of Health, the people off benefits and into work challenges for the DWP. It just might be the same quite practical intervention on someone's housing situation or their debt problem might solve a whole load of issues that are kind of arising in other government departments. And it's just that mindset shift has not yet fully landed, but it needs to, I think, if we're to go to the next level. And how have we managed to build it? As I say, it's been built by people long before me. It is the Manchester culture. It's an approach, I think, where people going back to the sort of 80s and then particularly in the 90s under Sir Howard and Sir Richard, they just decided that everyone had to lock in on this together to be able to do it. It couldn't be flaky, it couldn't be short term. And so the universities massively bought in, and we're really grateful to them. But also the private sector. We built a business culture through Midas. People will know maybe our inward investment agency. When they bring new investors in, we speak to them like family, and we work with them like that, and sort of knit them into everything else that we're doing. It's a culture, is the way I would describe it. It's a culture that is place first, not party first, and therefore it does allow people to buy in. And that was my point. Westminster is party first, not place first, and hence people might enter into it with some trepidation because of the agendas. And when you operate a truly place-first approach, as we try to do in Greater Manchester, there's always politics at the fringes, of course there is, but we do work hard at that. That is what builds the trust. That builds the sort of, the confidence in the long-term journey. And as I say, it's been built over many, many years. It's very, very hard to build, but once you've got it, it's truly priceless.
Brilliant. So I think, sadly, we're out of time, and I think we'll have to let you go and get back to the good work you've set out. But let me say a huge thank you again for that. You've given us lots of food for thought, and I'm sure that those ideas will continue in what we do later in the day, and we'll pick up on some of those ideas. But again, Andy, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.